Ancient Egyptians thrived for millennia thanks to their sunny land and the Nile's fertile waters, ideal for growing various crops. Wealth determined the food variety, with the less fortunate relying on staples like bread, beans, onions, and greens. Evidence from wall paintings and tomb artifacts vividly depicts their food practices across different periods. From overseeing food preparation in Old Kingdom tombs to offering plates of bread, meat, and vegetables in the New Kingdom, food played a central role in both life and afterlife beliefs. Funerary stelae often featured basic offerings like bread and beer, reflecting their importance in daily life. Food remnants found in tombs provide valuable insights, although analysing perishables like beer and dairy products presents challenges. Settlement sites for non-funerary evidence are scarce due to ongoing occupation and specific social structures of explored villages. Changes in climate and ecology over millennia have altered Egypt's flora and fauna, with modern crops like cotton and potatoes being later introductions. Government officials in ancient Egypt ensured grain security by storing wheat and barley in pharaoh-owned granaries during abundant harvests, safeguarding against scarcity in lean years. Grain, a dietary staple, was also a major component of wages for royal labourers. The Second Dynasty tomb at Saqqara, notably tomb 3477, revealed small barley bread loaves as part of the funerary feast, dubbed the Saqqara banquet, arranged for a noblewoman. Bread making in ancient Egypt was a straightforward process, starting with grain grinding into flour using a handstone or later a rotary quern. This technique, dating back to the Neolithic period, persisted until the more efficient rotary quern emerged around the 5th century BC, likely originating in the Western Mediterranean. Flour mixed with water and salt formed a dough shaped into flat loaves akin to pita bread. Unleavened dough could be cooked on a flat stone over a fire, in a clay oven, or even against the oven's pottery wall. Leavening likely involved a sourdough starter from previous batches, left overnight to ferment, a tradition continuing for millennia in Egypt. Loaves came in various shapes like ovals, triangles, and indented squares, often with slashes across the crust to aid rising. Some were crafted into animal or human figures, or ornate shapes for special occasions like religious festivals. Varieties included sweetened bread with honey or flavoured with nuts and spices. For instance, a fruit loaf at the Cairo Agricultural Museum featured mashed dates layered between dough discs. Beer was a significant part of ancient Egyptian life, consumed daily and in large quantities, especially during religious festivals and celebrations. Labourers, including pyramid builders, received a daily ration of over 10 pints of beer, providing essential calories for their demanding work. Clues from wooden models found in tombs shed light on ancient brewing practices, revealing how Egyptians strained their brewing mash through cloth into ceramic vessels. Ancient Egyptian brewers likely used a two-stage mash process, starting with a cold mash made from water and malted, ground grain or crumbled leavened loaves to preserve fermentation enzymes. A second mash mixed unmalted, ground grain with hot water, although heating risked killing these crucial enzymes. By combining separately prepared hot and cold mashes, Egyptians ensured both accessible starches and enzymes were present for conversion. Once mixed, the mash cooled, allowing enzymes to convert starches into fermentable sugars. Sieving the mash into a porous ceramic fermenting vessel provided an ideal surface for wild yeast culture growth, essential for fermentation. The resulting beer was consumed directly from these vessels, likely through clay straws, to prevent sediment consumption and maintain hygiene. Despite simpler methods compared to modern brewing, ancient Egyptian beer fermented faster and was more materially efficient. Without modern tools and microbiological knowledge, they produced refreshing beer continuously and in vast quantities, demonstrating their ingenuity in early brewing practices. While beer reigned supreme, wine also held a place in ancient Egyptian culture. Vineyards in the Nile Delta and grapevines in domestic gardens supplied grapes for winemaking. Harvested grapes were crushed by treaders, using their feet in large troughs, with the juice collected and fermented in ceramic jars. Fermentation lasted from a few days to weeks before sealing the jars for maturation. Some evidence suggests amphorae were coated with resin to prevent wine loss through porous pottery. The unique flavour of retsina, a Greek resonated wine, possibly originated from ancient practices of sealing wine vessels with Aleppo pine resin. It raises questions about whether ancient Egyptian wine shared a similar taste profile. Grapes and sun-dried raisins, often interchangeable, have been found in tombs, along with bunches of blue-black grapes and baskets of similar fruit in offering scenes. Tutankhamun's tomb contained dessert grapes in an attractive bottle-shaped basket around 1325 BC, showcasing the importance of grapes in ancient Egyptian culture. Egypt's arable land was primarily devoted to cereals and flax, with agricultural scenes featuring prominently. Small plots between larger fields were cultivated, irrigated by systems that divided the land into watered squares. The Nile, known as the to ancient Egyptians, deposited fertile silt during annual floods, fostering lush farmland along its banks, referred to as kemet or blackland. Workers' packed lunches often included bread, beer and onions, with historical accounts noting their provision to pyramid builders as wages. Garlic, smaller and milder in flavour than modern varieties, was also prevalent. Lettuces, though less recognisable in offerings, were elongated in shape, recommended in medical texts for various ailments, including impotence. Cucumbers, smaller and less seed-filled than European varieties, were likely pickled for year-round consumption. Despite claims of bean aversion, ancient Egyptians cultivated beans, peas and lentils, with chickpeas being a popular choice, possibly used in early versions of hummus. Vegetables supplemented by wild plants like papyrus and lotus, which provided both sustenance and religious significance. Fruits like figs, dates and pomegranates were staples, with figs also used to make wine and liqueur. Dates were consumed fresh, dried or made into puree and jam. Other fruits included the oval yellow berries of the persea tree and the potentially hallucinogenic mandrake fruit. In summary, vegetables and bread formed the dietary backbone for most Egyptians, with peasants likely subsisting on a primarily vegetarian diet, occasionally supplemented by fish or wildfowl as a luxury. Beef was a luxury reserved for the wealthy in ancient Egypt due to the need for grazing land, with scenes of butchery focusing on oxen. Every part of the animal was utilised, with blood used for blood sausage and various cuts depicted in scenes, some left to air cure into a form of biltong. Other meats like goat and mutton were considered inferior, while pork was deemed unclean and avoided by many Egyptians, particularly during festivities honouring Horus's victory over Seth, where pork consumption was permitted only once a year. However, archaeological finds suggest pork was a significant part of the working-class diet in certain periods and locations. Despite some taboos, fish were a staple food, readily available from the Nile. Fishermen, though looked down upon, provided plentiful catches, which were cleaned, gutted, and prepared for drying, salting or pickling. Poultry and wild birds were more affordable options and were widely consumed. Various bird species from the Nile's reed beds, including pigeons, storks, crane, egrets, teal, geese and ducks, were hunted or bought at markets. Hunting scenes depict Egyptians using throwing sticks to capture wildfowl, while domesticated ducks and geese provided eggs, as the widespread use of domestic fowl didn't occur until Roman times. Dairy products like goats or sheep's milk were likely common in ancient Egyptian villages, potentially cultured into yogurt or made into simple cheeses like labna and gebna, as evidenced by residues found in First Dynasty tombs. Condiments played a crucial role in diversifying diets, with salt, oil and vinegar, essential for both flavouring and preserving food. While the use of vinegar is uncertain due to indistinguishable residues from beer and wine, its potential for flavouring and preserving in hot climates suggests its likely adoption by ancient Egyptians. Salt, sourced from natural deposits or salt pans, was vital for curing and preserving fish and meat. Oil, particularly olive oil, was valued, evident from its inclusion in royal servants' daily rations. Honey, a prized sweetener, was stored in various jars and used widely, with poorer Egyptians relying on fruit like figs and dates for sweetness. Fruit purees or concentrates like pomegranate syrup were also utilised in sauces. Herbs like parsley, coriander and mint, either grown or gathered, flavoured meats and dishes. Rosemary, naturally occurring in Egypt, likely featured in ancient cuisine, along with other herbs like dill, chervil, and fennel. Spices such as cumin, fenugreek, and black seed mustard added depth to dishes, while poppies, cultivated for medicinal purposes, would have been available for culinary use. Egyptian cooking methods and recipes are not well documented, but insights can be gleaned from medicinal papyri and archaeological evidence. Cooking was typically conducted outdoors or in kitchen areas at the back of houses, often under lightweight thatched roofs to allow smoke and smells to escape. Mud brick or clay ovens were common, along with mortars for grain grinding. Wealthier individuals might have had servants using charcoal braziers for roasting, grilling, or stewing meat. Fire was typically ignited using hand drills or bow drills, generating frictional heat to produce glowing coals from dense tinder. These methods were essential for cooking and warmth in Egyptian households. Cooking techniques for various meats, sheep, pig, or ox, were likely similar, with no evidence of elaborate sauces or plated meals. Meats were typically served with various bread types, reflecting the simplicity of ancient Egyptian cuisine.